Hello and very warm welcome at Amish Shackle 5858. I am Amish Shackle. Foreign news have been reported by American, European, Asian, African, Australian news channels and the news agencies. So please, let's go to the headlines.
David Muir, ABC's World News Tonight, America's most watched newscast. Now streaming same day with all the breaking news of the day on Disney Plus. Most watched, most trusted. Now on Disney Plus every night.
Tonight, breaking news, ABC News exclusive. The 5-year-old Minneapolis boy and his father detained by federal agents and confined in Texas. They're back home tonight, and ABC News was with them on the plane. Also tonight, new images from the Epstein files and the new pressure on former Prince Andrew. And after snow and ice from Florida to Virginia, another Arctic blast is on the way. Nearly 2 weeks after being detained, tonight exclusive images of Liam and his father going home. A judge ordering their release, saying their removal to Texas was unconstitutional. New details about their days in confinement and what Liam says he's looking forward to most now. Minneapolis is bracing for new protests as new images of federal agents emerge. Dashcam video shows agents with guns drawn appearing to force a driver out of her vehicle, then detaining her. And the scenes at the Minneapolis City Park Sunday morning, a handcuffed man on his knees. New images from the newly released Epstein files show former Prince Andrew crouching over a woman, intensifying pressure for him to testify before Congress. Millions reeling from dangerous winter weather, more than a foot of snow in the Carolinas, a train slamming a truck stuck on the tracks. Tens of thousands without power, including Nashville, where it's been more than a week, and now bitter cold as far south as the Sunshine State. Meteorologist Danny Beckstrom has the forecast. President Trump at new questions about a possible conflict of interest. The Wall Street Journal is reporting that an Abu Dhabi royal secretly purchased a 49% stake, $500 million in the Trump family's cryptocurrency firm 4 days before the inauguration. The White House says the president was not involved. The FBI raids a home in Las Vegas suspecting an illegal biological laboratory inside. 3 fraternity members under arrest after an 18-year-old was found dead the morning after a rush party. 1 week to the Super Bowl, the Patriots and Seahawks are heading to the Bay Area, an early morning rally before the Patriots headed west. The Seahawks arriving in California this evening. And with deadly cold gripping so much of the country, one man is using his vintage fire truck to help neighbors in need, giving them a lift to shelter from the cold. Tonight's America Strong.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is
on this Sunday night, war of words. Iran's supreme leader warns a U.S. attack would spark war in the Middle East. As thousands of Canadians call for an end to the regime, a 5-year-old detained by U.S. immigration agents in Minnesota is released as anti-ICE protests spread. In the age of artificial intelligence, how to AI-proof your resume. Plus, help wanted in Antarctica.
Don't think twice. Just go for it. Put your name down.
Why the world's coldest continent is on a hiring spree.
Global National. Reporting tonight, Jeff Semple.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. Iran's supreme leader issued a stark warning today in response to the threat of a U.S. military attack against his Islamic regime. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei said Iran will strike a strong blow against anyone who attacks, and that if Americans start a war, it will be a regional war. For weeks, the U.S. president has warned of potential military action if Iran does not agree to a new nuclear deal. And Donald Trump doubled down today, saying the U.S. is now massing powerful ships in the region. Trump says he's prepared to find out if Iran will make good on its latest threat of regional war. The U.S. president also demanded that Iran stop killing protesters following its deadly crackdown on nationwide anti-government demonstrations. The death toll there now is believed to be in the tens of thousands. Canada is home to one of the largest Iranian diasporas in the world, and today thousands gathered across this country calling for an end to the regime. Lexi Benedict reports.
The sound of tens of thousands of protesters braving the freezing temperatures to make sure their voices are heard. Their message now as clear as it's been for weeks.
You have to get rid of the brutal regime.
This demonstration comes as tensions continue to rise overseas, with Iran's supreme leader issuing a stark warning that any U.S. attack would spark a regional war in the Middle East. It follows threats from U.S. President Donald Trump, who says military action remains on the table over Iran's crackdown on nationwide protests. And on Sunday, Trump downplayed Iran's warning of a regional war.
Of course you can say that, but we have the biggest, most powerful ships in the world over there, very close, a couple of days, and hopefully we'll make a deal. If we don't make a deal, then we'll find out whether or not he was right.
Even if President Trump doesn't do much or Israel doesn't show up, Iranians are still going to go on the streets and they're still going to do what they feel is necessary in order to bring this regime down.
Demonstrations in Iran began on December 28th, and since then, protesters have faced a deadly crack.
Yeah, joining us now is Michelle Tafoya, Minnesota's Senate candidate and former NFL sideline reporter. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Michelle.
Good to see y'all.
You've sat and watched the last couple of weeks in Minnesota. You've seen how Tim Walz, Jacob Fry have acted. You've seen how the DHS, ICE, and Border Patrol have acted under Kristi Noem and Greg Bovino. Now we have Tom Homan there. In your opinion, being someone who's trying to represent these folks in Minnesota, is this a necessary change by DHS?
Yeah, actually, I think the Trump administration, Joey, made a really good decision, a wise decision by sending Tom Homan to Minneapolis. Things had really gotten heated. Obviously, we suffered 2 deaths, Renee Good and Alex Preddy. There was nothing positive about that. I am really glad you had Mark Ross on earlier, the head of the St. Paul Police Federation, who told you that had they been allowed to do their jobs, had Jacob Fry, the mayor of Minneapolis, had the mayor of St. Paul, had Tim Walz allowed the local police officers to set up perimeters to protect these federal law enforcement agents from these protesters, because these weren't just peaceful protests, as you saw, then I think we would have avoided so much of the damage. But yes, things have really settled down since Tom Homan came in, and we hope it stays that way for sure.
Michelle, the argument is that so much of the unrest, so much of the lack of cooperation we have seen in Minnesota is because trying to change the news cycle, trying to make it so that the fraud goes to the back pages, which quite frankly it has. But there are individuals like you that want to put it back on the front burner, and an individual by the name David Hawk. He's a Minnesota whistleblower, and he said, look, if you thought you knew it was bad based upon what you knew at the time, wait until you hear what I have to say. Let's take a listen.
What I saw from this government over the weekend, last week, arresting Don Lemon, arresting independent journalists here in Minnesota, that should scare the hell out of all of us.
All right, apologize for that, Michelle. We had a different soundbite. That was Ann Craig, the representative there, politician, and that's on the Don Lemon side of this, so I'll pivot, because that's what we do. You are in sports, you understand, you get a defense, that's not the one you expect, and you got to call something different. When it comes to what you saw...
Change.
Right, you get it. When you saw what happened in Don Lemon going into that church, as a journalist, would you have ever dared walk into a church and ask people a question that was not about religion? I mean, go in there and pretend like you're Walter Cronkite when people are just trying to pray and talk to God.
Listen, it was a federal grand jury that indicted Don Lemon. And so the justice system is going to play this out, is going to take its course. But there's something called the FACE Act, which not only protects abortion clinics, it protects houses of worship. And sadly, our Attorney General, Keith Ellison, wasn't aware of that. He didn't even know that houses of worship were protected by the FACE Act. That's sad, and it's frustrating to a lot of us. But so what happened in this case was these people's rights to worship were taken from them in the middle of this service in the most really despicable of ways. It was really awful. Everyone's seen the video. So we'll let this take its course, but Don Lemon is finding out something he always preached is true. No one is above the law, even TV personalities.
Well, Michelle, it's good to see you. We just watched that clip of Kristi Noem, and she was talking about these protests being well-funded and well-organized. I want to focus on that well-funded piece. Do we know anything there? And would you, now running for U.S. Senate in the state of Minnesota, would you like to see an investigation into this?
Well, absolutely. I mean, we've heard this time and time again across the country that some of these biggest, loudest, most, I guess, successful protests by their standards are funded. And we've seen, the entrails of this. We see connections. Look, protest is fine when it's peaceful. I am all about the First Amendment. But when you start throwing cars into the mix, when you start throwing frozen water bottles, when you start throwing ice cubes, big chunks of ice at law enforcement agents, when you start to do these things that are violent and dangerous, you're making the scene dangerous for everyone, yourselves and law enforcement included. So whoever's paying for this, you see a lot of the gas masks, you see a lot of the signage that matches. I'm sure there were organic protesters as well, and that's fine. And if you don't like the law, we have a process in the United States of how to get that fixed. But we have this crisis of leadership here in Minnesota, and I think in many other places, where our government, quote-unquote, leaders are saying, get in their face, disrupt, resist, and this is just laying the foundation for a really dangerous situation for everyone. This crisis of leadership is why I'm running for United.
This is Sky News, the headlines. Lord Mandelson resigns from the Labour Party. The former government minister says he does not wish to cause further embarrassment over his links to Jeffrey Epstein.
Do you think you're the devil himself? No, but I do have a good mirror.
New footage emerges in the latest released evidence with the convicted paedophile answering questions about being a sexual predator. Iran's supreme leader warns Donald Trump against military action, insisting any strike on his country would kick off a regional war. Russian strikes hit a hospital and a bus in Ukraine, killing at least 12 people. Making history, tennis star Carlos Alcaraz beats Novak Djokovic, becoming the youngest man to complete the career Grand Slam. Good morning. Lord Mandelson has resigned from the Labour Party, saying he does not wish to cause further embarrassment over his links to the convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Documents we've analysed today suggest that Epstein paid Peter Mandelson $75,000 in the early 2000s. In his letter, he said, "I have been further linked this weekend to the understandable furore surrounding Jeffrey Epstein, and I feel regretful and sorry about this. Allegations, which I believe to be false, that he made financial payments to me 20 years ago, and of which I have no record or recollection, need investigating by me. While doing this, I do not wish to cause further embarrassment to the Labour Party, and I am therefore stepping down from membership of the party." Our chief political correspondent, John Craig, has more.
Lord Mandelson's caused the Labour Party massive embarrassment over this weekend, and that's because of a huge slew of more lurid allegations, both regarding money and, of course, an embarrassing photograph appearing on the Epstein files, simply wearing a T-shirt and underwear. Well, he has bowed to pressure to go. At 10:18 p.m, Lord Mandelson issued a statement announcing that he had resigned from the Labour Party. He said he'd written to the Labour Party General Secretary, that is Holly Ridley, saying he was stepping down. He went on to say that he wanted to take the opportunity to repeat his apology to the women and girls whose voices should have been heard long before now. Those are the victims of Epstein's crimes. It's worth mentioning that in a television interview last month, he did not apologise, and only did so a day or so later when he was criticised for not apologising in that interview. Now, Lord Mandelson's announcement of that he's quitting the Labour Party came hours after Kemi Badenoch went on the attack. and she said that if Keir Starmer had a backbone, he would suspend Mandelson's membership of the Labour Party and launch an investigation into the allegations about Epstein sending money to his then partner, Ronaldo da Silva, and of course, who's now his husband. They married in 2023. This is the end of Lord Mandelson's career. His position in the House of Lords is less clear. There's a procedure for leaving the Lords, although in some cases peers do get to keep the title. But this is the end of a checkered career, a colourful, controversial career that began really when Peter Mandelson, who worked in TV initially, became Labour's spin doctor under Neil Kinnock in the 1980s. He earned the nickname the Prince.
ABC. Or stream the entire series now on ABC iView. Today, the Nationals leader to stare down a challenge as politicians return to Canberra. New details emerge at the start of a renewed search for fugitive Desi Freeman in Victoria. A looming interest rate hike tipped to stall an already slowing property market. And the new king of Melbourne Park, Carlos Alcaraz, relishing his Australian Open victory. Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Catherine Robinson. The Prime Minister has used an address to the Labor caucus during the first official sitting week of the year to take a swipe at the Liberals and Nationals. Both parties are grappling with internal divisions and leadership instability after the coalition split up last month. Anthony Albanese says his government is focused on addressing cost of living pressures in contrast to his political opponents. Political reporter Samantha Dick is in Parliament House.
Well, it has been a very challenging few weeks for the opposition, and Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has been seizing the opportunity today to dig the boot in a little bit further. Now, to get you up to speed with the latest chaos, today Nationals backbencher Colin Boyce is expected to move a leadership spill motion, which is basically a declaration that the leadership of the Nationals Party should be contested. Interestingly, Colin Boyce has made it clear that he doesn't want the leadership for himself necessarily. This is all about venting frustration about the coalition split after the Nationals walked away from the Liberal Party due to a dispute over Labor's hate speech laws. At the time, Nationals leader David Littleproud said that the coalition could not be reunited as long as Susan Lee remained leader of the Liberal Party. And then last week, Nationals MP Colin Boyce surprised many of his colleagues by announcing on live television that he will move a leadership spill motion, essentially saying there's been too much drama under David Littleproud and that they need a new leader. Now, this bid is not likely to succeed, but it is an attempt to destabilise David Littleproud, and it could give way to propel for another challenger to make a move. Meanwhile, Susan Lee's leadership, of course, has been under pressure with speculation mounting over leadership in coming weeks. As this has all been unfolding, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has been sitting back, and today he used an address to the Labor caucus to take aim at the infighting within both the Liberals and the Nationals.
You can't fight for Australia if you're obsessed by fighting each other, and that is what we are seeing on the other side, with the fragmentation of people competing for who can be more right-wing, who can be more divisive, who can dislike their own people more and more.
So, Sam, the Parliament is obviously sitting tomorrow. What do you know of there being any moves for the coalition to be reunited?
Well, broadly speaking, the Nationals do want to get back with the Liberal Party. Nationals leader David Littleproud is due to have a meeting with Liberal leader Susan Lee once his own leadership challenge is dealt with, so that could be happening today or tomorrow. Nationals Deputy Leader Kevin Hogan spoke to the ABC earlier this morning where he said that, yes, the Nationals do want to get back with the coalition, but he said that, firstly, the three Nationals senators who were demoted after crossing the floor on Labor's hate speech laws should be reinstated to Susan Lee's front bench. Take a listen.
When David is successful today, he will sit down with Susan as soon as possible and have discussions about how we can do what we can do going forward. But I say, not to be tricky, not to be ultimatums, but obviously we believe that those three senators in good faith have to be reinstated because they are reflecting a party room position.
Now, the Liberal Party is, of course, facing its own instability. Last week, Susan Lee was again undermined when Liberal leadership hopefuls Angus Taylor and Andrew Hastie
This is Asia First.
Good morning, it's 9 o'clock. I'm Arnold Gay, and here are the headlines this hour. The U.S. President Donald Trump downplays some of the most direct threats from Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, warning an American attack would trigger a regional war in the Middle East. But Mr. Trump remains hopeful that the Islamic Republic will strike a deal to avoid U.S. military intervention over Iran's nuclear ambitions and deadly crackdown on anti-government protests.
I'm Elizabeth Neal. Also this morning, India denies Pakistan's allegations of its involvement in recent attacks in Balochistan. New Delhi calling the claim baseless and an attempt to deflect attention. Islamabad earlier said Indian-backed terrorists carried out coordinated strikes in the southwestern province, which led to a 40-hour battle with the military. Pakistani officials say more than 190 were killed, including dozens of civilians. In business news, investors reassessing the outlook for U.S. interest rates following President Trump's nomination of Kevin Walsh for chair of the Federal Reserve. Bitcoin falls below $80,000 as metals take a dramatic downturn. Gold earlier seeing its biggest drop in more than a decade. Plus, India lays out its financial plans, pledging to accelerate growth amid a volatile global environment as it seeks to ramp up domestic manufacturing. Rare earths also in focus as the Modi government looks to support mineral-rich states later. And I'm Julie Yu, live from Space Summit 2026 in Singapore, where the future of the space economy and how to keep it safe, sustainable, and inclusive is under the spotlight. I'll have more on the key agendas and what to watch out for later in the show.
President Trump has expressed hope for a deal with Iran as tensions rise over threats of U.S. military action against Tehran.
Yeah, Iran's supreme leader had earlier warned of a regional conflict if the U.S. attacks his country.
Sir, on Iran, the Supreme Leader today said that the U.S. attack could spark a regional war. Giving you response to that?
Why wouldn't he say that? Of course he would say that, but we have the biggest, most powerful ships in the world over there, very close, a couple of days, and hopefully we'll make a deal. If we don't make a deal, then we'll find out whether or not he was right.
Well, President Trump's comments come amid a buildup in U.S. military forces in the Middle East. An aircraft carrier group is currently stationed in the region, sparking concerns of an imminent attack on Iran.
The U.S. leader has threatened to intervene in Iran over Tehran's recent deadly crackdown on anti-government protests, as well as its long-standing nuclear ambitions. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, has vowed to retaliate if his nation is attacked.
حالا این آقا هم همینطور مرتباً ادعا میکنه ولی ما نام آوردیم و چه کردیم به نظر من ملتی
Africa News. The news.
The Democratic Republic of Congo has authorized the resumption of transport and trade on Lake Tanganyika in the east of the country. Connections between the towns of Uvira and Kalemi are once again operational, as are those with neighboring countries, notably Burundi, Tanzania, and Zambia. It's a breath of fresh air for the local population impacted by the month-and-a-half suspension. We're happy to still be here in Uvira. We've not encountered any major obstacles or difficulties apart from the suffering we've endured. We're glad to be able to resume our activities in peace. When Uvira fell to the M23 rebels in December, many families fled the strategic town. Some took refuge in Burundi or Kalimi, where they often faced precarious conditions. Today, with the resumption of lake traffic and a relative improvement in the security situation, people are gradually beginning to return home. When we heard the Congolese soldiers had returned to Uvira, we also decided to come back. We're grateful to the government for restoring peace because wherever we went with the children, we had no clothes and lived in great precariousness. The resumption of traffic is also benefiting the world of work. During the suspension of lake transport, trade was severely disrupted. But at the ports of Kalemi and Uvira, the loading and unloading of goods is slowly recommencing. This is allowing many port workers to return to their jobs after several weeks of forced unemployment. We suffered greatly from the lack of work. Our lives changed completely. It was an ordeal. We thank God for our regained freedom. Activities are resuming. We're starting to unload again to get food and medicine. A welcome relief as basic necessities like fish, flour and rice have become scarce in Uvira's markets, leading to price increases and complicating the lives of residents. In a retaliatory move, Iran has declared the armies of European Union countries as terrorist groups. The announcement comes days after the EU agreed to add Tehran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps to the bloc's list of terrorist organizations. Its decision follows the Islamic Republic's bloodiest crackdown on protests since its establishment in 1979. Armies of European countries are considered terrorist groups, and the European Union is responsible for the consequences of this decision. The mostly symbolic announcement comes amid heightened tensions in the Middle East as US President Donald Trump weighs a possible military strike against Iran.
This is DW News. These are our top stories. Israel has said it will reopen the Rafah border crossing between Gaza and Egypt for limited crossings on Monday after a nearly 2-year closure. Movement in and out of Gaza will be subject to Israeli security checks. Many Palestinians are hoping to leave Gaza to seek medical care abroad. Ukrainian authorities say several people are dead after Russian drones struck a bus carrying mine workers. It comes after a strike earlier this weekend on a maternity hospital left several people injured. Russia has stepped up its attacks on Ukraine ahead of a new round of US-brokered peace talks in Abu Dhabi later this week. A 5-year-old Ecuadorian boy and his father have been released from a Texas detention center. They were held there for almost 2 weeks after being arrested by U.S. immigration agents at their home over 1,000 kilometers away. The judge who ordered their release said the Trump administration is pursuing deportation quotas at the expense of traumatizing children. This is DW News from Berlin. For more, go to our website, dw.com.
Migrant crisis revisited on France 24.
Thanks for staying with us on Night Watch on France 24. These are the main stories we're looking at this hour. The Rafah border between Gaza and Egypt is expected to reopen to Palestinians in the coming hours after nearly 2 years of closure. Initially, around 50 people in need of medical treatment will be allowed to leave each day on foot, with another 50 who fled the territory during the war allowed to re-enter. Iran orders the release of Irfan Soltani, a 26-year-old arrested during the deadly crackdown on nationwide protests and reportedly sentenced to death. It follows Donald Trump's warnings last month for Tehran not to carry out executions, and as both sides are now reporting progress in negotiations over Iran's nuclear program. And prominent Venezuelan dissident Javier Tarazona is freed after more than 4 years in jail on terrorism and treason charges. It's the latest release by interim leader Delcy Rodriguez under pressure from the US after the removal of President Nicolas Maduro a month ago. Rights groups say more than 700 political prisoners remain in jail.
Thank you for watching Amish Shakil 5858. I am Amish Shakil. I hope you will visit again. Have a good life. Bye-bye.